One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Alright, so let's get this rolling. We're back. So that was our plan. We've got our paints picked out. The brushes I'm going to use today, I've got some just generic Kolinsky Sable brushes picked out, but I've also put aside one size 00 Rosemary & Co. with a very, very sharp tip. And this monstrosity, although it looks like it's a big mess, is actually a Winsor & Newton size 2, Series 7 size 2 in very good condition. So that will probably be my main detail brush for today. So the key thing is you may need a very good sharp pointed brush to do fur texture as we go. Okay, so setting up the palette. Let's get that going on. I'm going to do the fur colors across the top. That's going to be the main one. Then the greens. Then I'll do the skin and other varieties of mess down below. So I'm going to start by putting some brown liner on the palette. This is the shadow color for my orange fur. Then auburn red, auburn shadow it's called. And then carrot top red. And as usual, I'm going to go from dark to light, from left to right. So if I'm ever like not 100% sure which color I need, I can just look at the mini and say maybe lighter than what I just did, and then I just shift one color to the right to get a lighter one. Or if I want something darker, I can always move to the left and find a darker color. And I find that if I set up my palette systematically like that, everything's a little bit easier. Should never shake the bottle with no lid on it directly over the palette, which is what I just did. There's now specks of orange all through the palette. But since orange is going to be like the main color scheme, hopefully that's not too much of a problem. We'll see as we go. Of course, I got orange paint all over my hands now. All over my shirt as well. That's always a good start to the class. All right, some highlight orange. That's way too much highlight orange. I don't need nearly that much. And I'm going to put some creamy ivory up here in the right-hand corner in case I decide I need to lighten something up further. And I'm going to put a little bit of yellow up there as well. I have a feeling I will need yellow in the fur and in the skin tone to make it work. Then we're going to do green for green armor. We're going to start with green liner. And you can use, if you don't have green liner or something similarly dark, pine green's not bad. Or you can just take whatever green you're going to use and add black to it. Put a big dollop of black or a very, very dark blue on your palette to prepare for that. All right, more dried up paint bottles, more mess. There we go. Get that gunk out of there. Lovely junk coming out of the cap of that bottle. There we go. Now we got green paint. Just shove all that crap back in there. What a mess. And again, creamy ivory and yellow will be used to create highlights in the green. And for the damage to the leather armor, I've got some leather brown. And we'll use creamy ivory to lighten that as well. And what am I still needing? We still need some, skin tone. Need some skin tone. I'm just going to use tan skin. There it is, tan skin. Tanned highlight. And we need some leather color, so I'll use russet brown. oiled leather. So just a tip for people, if you are finding that the bottles get crusted over. Yeah, here's a tip. Put the paint in the palette. Gently squeeze the bottle just a little bit. Okay? Wipe off all the gunk. No, just wipe off the gunk. Don't take the cap off the bottle. There you go. So squeeze it gently. Wipe off the cap, and while it's still squeezed, put the cap back on, and that'll help keep you from getting that crusty mess in the top of the bottle. I never bother to do that. That's why my paints are a mess all the time. And I often end up with chunks of partly dried paint on the models and on my brush and on my paper towel and all that kind of stuff because I'm not very careful. Now, one other little trick for you. So, when I go to load the brush, first thing I do, rinse out the brush, clean it on the paper towel. Now, this paper towel is dry, which means as soon as I touch the brush to it, all the paint or all the water in that brush gets sucked out, right? I can't make a wet mark on anything. Barely, right? Now, that also means that if I go like to dap some paint off on the paper towel, all the paint's going to come out, everything's going to dry out. So I'm going to make like a little water bottle here. I make the paper towel wet to start with. That way I can clean my brush. I can still see if it's clean. It's all going to get cleaned out. But my brush is a little bit more damp. Okay, a little bit more moisture coming off of there than if I did it straight on the paper towel. Now when I load my brush, I'm going to start by loading it up with this brown liner. And then I go to prepare the brush. If I got too much paint on there, I can just gently reshape the point of the brush and I'm ready to paint. And that brush has got lots of paint on it. It hasn't been dried out by touching a dry paper towel. It's ready to go, and I'm going to get a beautiful, nice point on the brush. I can paint precisely. It's going to look good. Paint's going to flow smoothly. That's a Sergio Calvo trick. That's where I learned that from. That's not my invention. There we go. The only thing you want to be cautious of is having too much water in the brush, because that'll make your paint fly out and you get a flood. But for now, we've got our figure ready to go. Nice and focused. And we're going to start by painting brown liner as the base coat of all the skin. So where does that mean? That means we'll start with her legs. So we'll start with this leg. This is her left leg. We're going to paint this brown liner over the whole leg. Now, people often ask me, why do I start with the miniature black? So I don't prime the miniature. I'm just painting it black through the airbrush at the start. And that way I can be sure that every recess on the miniature is already painted black. So if I miss a spot, any spot I miss, which is likely to be something inside the sculpt, like underneath an arm or underneath a leg or something like that, it's already going to be black. So if I miss it, it's just going to be in the shadow. A lot of people like to prime with either gray or white, and if you paint over gray or white, it's probably, if you paint just a single coat of paint, it's going to look lighter over those base colors. But the technique we're going to use today with layering, we're going to add a lot of layers, lots of color, lots of light paint, and we're going to get better contrast because we're starting with a very, very dark color, and we can leave those recesses that dark color. And our highlights are still going to be nice and light, nice and bright, and look pretty good. So we want to make sure we paint her elbows as well. Her elbows are not armored. Her hands. So that's the elbow and her hand on her right hand. Yes, I painted the hooves with a brown liner as well. And the other question that I see, what is the brown to the right of the green? This is leather brown, Reaper's leather brown. This one. Okay. It doesn't have to be this color, it's just a lighter brown color, because typically where leather gets cracked, it looks that natural light brown color. Okay. Now we're going to do her left elbow. And her left hand. Okay, and the next thing we need to get is her face. So there's a lot of hair around her face. So the only thing really on her head that we're not painting right now would be those horns. However, as I look at it, I see the way the horns are sculpted. There's like a plate of bone or like horn material underneath. Let's paint all of that this color as well. So I might as well just paint like her whole head this color, including down around her neck, up to the top of the leather armor, her face, her eye sockets, everything. Paint everything a thin coat of brown liner. And what we'll do is we'll use the brown liner as the shadow color of the horns as well. And we'll just use a little trick to make that thick material underneath the horns visually disappear. So we're painting everything on her head with brown liner. Now just be careful around her face. We don't want to overbrush repeatedly on her face. So as you put a little bit of a coat of paint on there, allow it to dry before finishing. Go back and look again, see if there's any spots you missed, and if you did, make sure it's dry before you put the next coat of paint on. Her face is very small and very like there's little details there like around her eyes that if you put the paint on too heavy, you can kind of obscure those details. So just let it dry carefully before putting on any additional layers of brown liner. Brown liner is pretty thin, you still want to be careful. Okay, I'm just doing a double check on all those areas to see if I missed anything. I think I've got it on. No, missed your fingers. Look at that. There we go. Okay, so we need to let that dry for a moment now. So it's going to get kind of difficult to see the miniature as we paint more and more dark colors on her. But we just have to kind of bear with it. Ah, there I can see I missed a spot right in between the horns there. I'll get that now. I have to go a bit off camera to make that work because I can't quite reach it. There we go. One of the challenges of doing this paint along is that I have to keep the camera, keep the miniature in the field of view, which means I have to paint from all different angles. Well, normally I would move the miniature around the brush. But we'll see how that goes. Okay, so now we want to do green liner. So move down to the green level here. And we want to paint all of the armor this very dark green color. Now I'm going to put just a dab of leaf green in mine. I just feel like making it a little bit lighter. I don't know why. Maybe make it a little bit more opaque. The green liner is a really nice dark color, but I do find it is a bit transparent at times. Just a bit of leaf green, I feel like will make it a bit more opaque. There, I'm liking that color. So now we paint all the armor elements that dark green. So that's really just like the chest armor, the upper arm armor, and the skirt bits. I don't feel like these wrist pieces are part of it. You know what? Yeah, they are. The wrist pieces are going to be the same armor color. We can paint the wrist pieces this color too. So I'm going to start on her left arm and paint. Now, I don't want to have too much paint on the brush. Some of these details are really shallow, and I don't want them to get filled in with paint. So I'm just going to make sure I don't have too much paint on the brush. Really just by loading it carefully, rolling the brush in the paint. If I feel like I've got too much, I can go back and put the tip back on it, take some paint off on my paper towel, come back and keep going. So now I'm doing the right wrist. I can see that the challenge with this model is going to be painting the fur without accidentally hitting the green armor. We just need to take that a little bit slow and paint carefully. And she's a very little figure, so we just need to go slowly and carefully anyway. So painted the back of the shoulder armor on the right, shoulder armor on the left, the back of this cuirass kind of thing she's got going on. She's got a little, looks like a leather bag or leather pouch on her belt as well. Paint the skirt. That skirt is really cool. If I hadn't already decided to paint as leather armor, oh my gosh, we could paint that as like a tartan kilt or something. Ooh, I sense a future project. We're going to paint it as leather today, but in future I can see that being painted as a kilt. For sure. Not really a kilt. A kiltie, I think they call it, when it's not really got like all the volume of a full kilt. But not a great kilt, like a, yeah, it's like a kiltie, I think they call it. And by they, I mean my daughter and her friends in Highland dancing who are always talking about that stuff. I don't understand. Clearly I don't understand. But I think that would be a fun one to paint as a tartan. So I'm just getting all that filled in with this dark green color. And the front armor leather is visible from the back as well. So just reach in there and paint the back of that armor green in there as well. There we go. Look at that. 90% of the model is painted already. Now, what is going to be next? I think we can go back now and start doing our fur. So the plan for the fur, as I said, we're going to do a little bit of a fur texture. So I'm going to grab a hold of some auburn shadow. This is going to be my first layer of fur texture. So this is where what I was talking about before about loading the brush, where clean the brush out, dap it on the paper towel, load it with some of the orange paint, and you'll notice I'm not taking my paint from here. I move paint out from there to the side. I smooth out the paint, load the brush by rolling the brush. See, watch my index finger. I'm rolling the brush. Then dab it on the paper towel, on the wet area of the paper towel. And now I'm ready to go. And what I'm going to get from this, I have a very, very fine point on the brush, and I can control the amount of paint that's going to come out. Now there's already a fur texture there. And what I want to do, my light is going to be in the center. So like I'm going to have the light focused around her face and on the front and on the tops of her legs. So that's where I'm really going to focus. This color I'm using right now is like the shadow color of the fur. So we're going to cover a lot of this with later texture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ignore the sculpted texture, and I'm just going to paint little tiny lines of dark orange, which is the start of the fur texture. And it doesn't have to be super precise. It can be larger lines, but I want to keep them all really, really short. And what's going to happen is as we build up layers of color, when we get to later layers, we can make the fur lines smaller and smaller and smaller, depending on what your skill is with your paintbrush. But this initial sort of fur texturing will give a foundation for those lines, and it's creating the start of a texture. Now we can do this basically everywhere on her legs, including on the bottom side, because this is the color that's going to be the shadow of the fur that's going to be added later. So just make little dash marks. I'm just making little marks like this. I'll do a few on my thumb. Boop, 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 boop. And they don't have to be perfectly parallel, but they're basically little parallel marks, okay? And we just keep doing that all over the figure. Starting with the legs. Well, so I did a 3-hour painting workshop on Friday night, and then we did a 3-hour painting workshop yesterday morning. Then I painted all day yesterday afternoon, all yesterday afternoon. I did a 2.5-hour painting class this morning, and now we're doing this. So in each of those classes, I have to keep the miniature steady and not move it around so people can see what I'm doing, which means that my neck pain increases. So my neck is feels pretty sore right now. So if I complain a lot, just bear with me. You don't have to send me messages telling me to tough it out or whatever. Just let me be a whiner today, okay? So, working my way down the fronts of, so I just did her shins. Now I'll do these long extensions of her feet. It's almost got like little rabbit legs. Guess they're supposed to be like deer legs. I'm sure Christine Van Patten was the sculptor, by the way. I'm sure Christine has looked carefully at the deer anatomy to come up with the design for these. Christine sculpts lots of stuff for Reaper Miniatures, but she has her own miniature line too, which is called Moonlight Minis. And there's some really cool miniatures. So today is November 5th, 2023. And just a couple of days ago, her miniature painting contest on her website finished. So you should go check out Rainbow Sculptor on Etsy, Moonlight Minis on Facebook and Discord, and there's some really, really cool renditions of her minis that people painted for that painting competition. Some really cool stuff. we gave away, so like when you go to ReaperCon, they often give you promotional minis. So this year they gave away a Hairfolk monk from Moonlight Minis. And so I ended up with a few of them. And I gave them all away to different people to paint. Encouraged them to enter that painting competition. And one of those people got an honorable mention. So well done. You can go and check those out on the website. Sorry, on the Moonlight Minis Facebook page is the best place to see that stuff. So I'm just keeping making little dash marks to get this foundation for the texture done. And this is going to go right down to the fur, which extends just above the hoof. So how do we highlight a fur texture? This is a challenging question. So the way we highlight it is as we add more little fur lines and marks with lighter colors of paint and in smaller lines. Oh yeah, Heather, you got a runner-up too, didn't you? Yeah. So Dragon Eye, who's on the Miniature Monthly Mob there, she got one of the runner-ups. Yeah, congrats on that, Heather. That was really lovely. Do you remember who it was who won that? Okay, so there we go. Lots of little fur hash marks. Les Brimsky. No, I don't know that person either. I might, but like, it's one of those things where it could be a person who's using a pseudonym on Facebook. But beautifully painted. All right, so this orange is going to go right down onto the hooves as well. And why is that? Because the hooves are modified like fingernails. It's the same sort of material. And they tend to be the same color as the fur. The cells that make up hoof material are modified hair cells. Okay, so if you're not sure what color to make the hooves, make it the same as the shadow color of your hair. Same thing on horses' hooves and whatever. Okay, so there's the shadow color done on the main part of the hair on the legs. Now we're going to do the same thing on the arms, and this is a little bit more difficult. This is what I meant by these arms are going to be the most. No, I still did the texturing on the hooves, but if you look closely, you can see that I didn't paint the split between in the toes, the cloven kind of toes there. So it's a little bit like hooves are kind of hard to explain, right? They kind of had growth rings the same as your fingernails can. I don't know if you can see that there's like variation in the nails going out, and hooves look like that as well. So we can do like kind of marks like that on the hooves in parallel lines. You can do this on horns as well, and it matches the growth rings in a sense on the hooves. And fortunately, since this is a totally fantastic creature, we can make it up and do whatever we want, and nobody can say we're wrong. Well, they can say we're wrong, but it'd be right for our mini. So now the next thing I want to do is get in there to do the arm. And I'm going to do the arm the same way. Now you really need a nice point on the brush to get in there. So I'm just going to do little marks And they don't have to be the smallest ones that you can manage to paint. In fact, they shouldn't be. You're going to give yourself some room to make smaller marks later. And we paint all the way around. Remember, this is the shadow color of our orange fur. So there's the left arm done. I'll do the same thing on the right arm. It's a tiny little space to work in. There we go. I'm looking forward to when Reaper starts to make bigger miniatures again. Like some of their figures, especially now that they're 3D sculpted, I'm really hoping they start to do a line of like 54mm scale figures or even larger. I'd love to paint some of this stuff in a larger scale. Reaper has some really cool larger figures in the product line. Monique de Noir, Fenari is one. One that I've been working on at the moment is Dana Murphy, which is a lovely one. It's a much, much larger figure. That's a Reaper miniature as well. Dana Murphy. So if you think that's cool, go and try to persuade Reaper to do more of their larger scale figures. Especially where I'm getting old, my eyes are turning to crap. Bigger is better as far as I'm concerned. All right, let's keep going. So there was the upper arms, and now we got to do the hands the same way. Little tiny marks all over the back of the hands. The palms of the hands, I'm going to do skin tone, almost like she's got. Well, like I want to paint it as though she's got fur on the backs of her hands, but her palms are smooth. So we're just painting this orange fur color on the outside, and we'll paint the palms of the hand as smooth skin tone. There we go. And now the fun part. Now we're going to start to do the hair. Now the thing I'm trying to figure out is there's two little shapes below her chin, and I'm trying to decide if those are the ends of braids, if it's gemstones, is it a torque, is it a necklace? I am not sure. Looks like a torque to you? It's hard to say, but torque it is. Okay, which means that we will do all the hair this color, but we're going to leave those two shapes on her chest as, we'll do them as like maybe gemstones or steel or gold or something at the end. But this first bit, this looks like an earring to me. So it looks like there's an earring. Oh no, they're braids. They're braids. No, that's an earring. So the left ear has an earring. The right ear does not. The right side of the face has a braid. The left side does not. Wow, this is a complicated, cool little, tiny little mini. So here we go. Getting my orange loaded up. And I'm going to start by painting each of these little shapes in the braid are orange shadow color. And my brush strokes are going to go parallel to the direction of the grain, if you will, in the hair. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this stuff on her head. I broke my own rule. Need to paint this as though that braiding was not there. So we give a volume to the overall shape of the braid first, and then later we're going to give a texture to it. Same thing with this braid that runs across the front of her head. We paint it first as though it did not have that braided texture. So we want to paint it and just leave a little bit of the brown liner showing at the bottom of it and at the top of it, but we'll paint the individual shapes within that in a little while. And then we need to start looking for, oops, grabbed the wrong orange color, other shapes inside the hair. So there's another braid there. Another one back there. This is very complicated hair. There we go. Now, go in the back beside the left side of her head. I see 1, 2, 3 separate braids. Paint each of them as a separate volume. And it looks to me like the hair does not have any braids in it on that part. It's just like smooth flowing hair. So we'll do it as a single volume to start with. So this area on the front, okay, we'll paint that just up to just below her ear. And the brush strokes are going to pull outwards from there and downwards towards the middle of this curve. And then we'll paint it the other way. We'll reach down to the bottom and pull upwards. Kind of ignore the texture, so that we end up with a nice bright bit of orange in the middle there. And that's going to be the foundation of our highlight in the hair. And the bottom of the curve here, paint that with the brush strokes going outwards. Same thing from the back. We've got to get the top of that somehow. We'll reach in there. Oh, and there's a mold line that I hadn't seen before. There's a mold line on the top of the hair that goes over. But if I start hacking away at that mold line right now, this video will take an extra half an hour. So I'm just going to leave that one and live with it for now. But always have to remember that quote from the great Vincent Venturella: what is the time to remove a mold line? And the answer is now. So as soon as you find one, always remove it. I'm going to claim that in this circumstance, if I do, I won't be able to finish the mini in time, because I'd have to go back and but redo the base coats and everything. It would take forever. It'd probably take me 20 minutes, so I'm not doing it. Now, this massive hair on the top of the head is what I'm trying to get at and still stay on camera somehow. In here. Paint our way around that curve and forward. And we want to make sure we get some of that hair in between the horns coming forward. Try to leave a little bit of the brown liner between the horns and the hair, if you can. And then the last little bit of hair to get at is in here. Okay, feel pretty good about that. So the inside of her ears is going to be skin tone, but the outside of her ears is going to be this same orange color. So we'll just do a whole bunch of little thin lines on the ears pointing parallel to the ears out towards the tip. Do the same thing on the back of the other ear. Wow, that was challenging for sure. Okay, I think I got everything that I wanted to. Missed a little bit under her arm there. I'll just put a few little dashes in there. Okay. That's fine. So the question was, trying to do the small strokes, but with the texture on the mini, you're ending up with brown liner splotches showing through. And that is, in fact, what we're going for. It's okay for those to show through, because in the next layers, that'll create more depth and variation in the fur, and it'll look like shadows under little bits of fur. So yes, we do want brown liner to show through. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to start building up. I think we need to put the base coat on the skin tone so we can see where the face is and what that's going to look like. So I'm going to grab a little bit of auburn shadow, and this is my skin tone line. I'm going to take some of the medium, or this is tan skin. I'm going to mix it with the auburn shadow so I get it sort of an orangey color. And I feel like that's a little bit too light. I'm going to put a little bit of russet brown in there. No, it's not quite given the color that I want. I want something a little bit redder maybe. So I'm just going to grab Reaper Deep Red. Let's throw some deep red on the palette. Just a touch of red. Oh, hey, right on. Somebody dropped a shot there for us. Feels a little Christmassy. Okay, I get that. That's fine. Right on. Looking good. You're on the right track. Very good. Okay, so I grabbed a little bit of deep red, and I just want to really make the shadow layer of the skin tone bit darker, a bit more red. And now I'm going to paint this color on the inside of her ears. So I'm going to leave the shadow that's inside the ear. I'm going to paint this on the lower part of the ear on the inside. Almost think about like if you flip back a dog's ear or a puppy's ear, inside is smoother skin and very light colored, and that's what I want this to be. Now my paint is thickening up a little bit, so I'm going to put just a touch of water in there to make it flow better. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint her face. So I'm going to start on the upper part of her left cheek, and I'm going to pull that paint from the left up to the front of her nose. I'm going to be careful not to make like a thick layer of paint, and I'm not going to go over it again. I'm going to let that dry. Do the same thing on the right cheek. Pull forward, bring that paint up right alongside the nose, right up onto the bridge of her nose, her upper lip, and on her chin. I left the lips unpainted, and now I'm going to do, so now I can see where her eyelids are. She's got very cool little eyelids that, if you're precise, can be painted separately. Bottom and top eyelids can be painted separately. A little bit of skin under her eyebrow. And we'll come back, we'll paint her her eyebrows dark orange. I'm going to make sure we get a little bit of skin tone up next to where the earring is in her ear, on the left ear. Get those eyelids on her left eye. Well done. That's a cool mini. And now we paint the forehead, making sure to leave a little bit of the brown liner showing between the orange hair and this pinkish first coat of skin tone. And we'll let that dry now. I'll do the same color on her neck, just above the torque, between the two bits at the end of the torque. I think that's about as much as I want to do with that skin. Now her neck is prominently visible under there. So this skin shadow color goes on her neck as well. There we go. There it is. I like it. So now we are going to put this same color on the palm of her left hand. So inside the thumb, where the thumbnail would be, crease of the palm of the hand, and then each individual finger gets a little stripe of this. That's not super important because that hand is underneath, but we're going to give that a little bit of a skin tone highlight. Okay, and thumbnail on the other hand if you're feeling like it. And tips of the fingers on the right hand where they're visible by the spearhead, or by the grip of the spear. There we go. That works for me. Did we miss anything which needs this color? Nope. Okay. So now we're going to go and start layering up the skin on her, the skin tone on her face. So I'm going to grab the tan skin, add it into my earlier mix. So that makes this tan skin just a little bit pinker. A little bit of water, just a touch of water to make it flow a bit more smoothly. Really, just a little touch. And now what we're going to do is we're going to work on bringing up the colors in her face. So I want the spotlight to be basically in the center of her face. So the forehead is my focus. And pull from the edges in towards the center of the forehead, bridge of the nose. Now she's got tiny, tiny little nostrils on each side. We make sure we get those. It's really the kind of model where you need a really, really sharp brush to paint. There we go. And now there's a space with skin under that eyebrow. Upper eyelid on the left eye. I can't believe I'm suggesting that you paint the upper eyelid on the left eye. The lower eyelid separately from the cheek. There we go. And highlight on the cheek. Try to leave that previous color. Don't completely cover it. Likely a lot of it's going to get covered. But try to leave a little bit of it showing at the edge and particularly under the cheekbone. And we work our way towards the center of the face from the edge. Same thing, we'll do the opposite eye. Do the eyelid. Bottom eyelid separate from the cheek. Then the cheek. Upper lip, connect all that together. And then under her mouth, she's got little teeth showing, like little fangs almost. And bring that out towards the point of her chin as a highlight. Okay, and now I'm not worried about her neck again. I think we've done enough on the neck. But we do need to do the inside of her ears more. So I want this highlight to kind of be at the tip of the ear and a little bit towards the center of the ear. Almost like there's like the inside of her ear is pink, but the tip of her ear underneath is getting more light. Two little highlights going on there. Now, I've managed to get a dark spot right in the middle of the forehead, so I'm going to do a second layer of this same color right in the middle. Try to smooth that out a little bit. No, that was like the first thing I painted, so it's dry enough to try that. You want to be sure that's dry before you try that. Otherwise, you get that lovely mess where you end up moving some chunks of partly dried paint around. There we go. Now her face is a little bit more visible. And this color goes on the palm of the left hand. So inside the thumb, palm of the hand, inside of the fingers. And try to leave a little bit of the previous color showing. It's tough. Those are tiny little fingers. That's what we want to try to do. There we go. Nice. I like it. Thumbnail. Tips of the fingers on the hand holding the spear. We're probably going to make a mess and hit those by accident, but let's do it anyway. Okay, now we're going to keep going on the face. Let's grab just plain skin tone with no other shadow color or anything added into it, and we're going to reapply that last highlight. You might need to put just a tiny bit of water in there. Mine's drying out a bit. There we go. Of course, you know there's no set formulas. You're going to have to manage your own paint. Decide whether it's fluid enough or it's too dry. And now we're going to do same highlight in the middle of the forehead again, but smaller than before. Bridge of the nose. And do her little nostrils. Outside of her nostrils is a separate dot this time. And now we're going to do the upper eyelid, lower eyelids, upper eyelid on both sides, I think. And then we want to highlight in the middle of the cheek, just below that lower eyelid, and the side of that highlight. That highlight goes down along the side of the nose and connects to the highlight of the upper lip. And do the same thing on the other cheek. Okay, and then a little separate highlight on the center of the chin, being aware of those little fangs she's got shown there. Cool. Now we want to do this same color inside the ear, close to the body, and a little highlight of it along the edge and out towards the tip of the ear. Same thing on the opposite side, close to that earring. A little bit out at the tip. There we go. Now, this might be too light of a color for the palm of the hand. Yeah, it kind of is. So we don't need to do any more on the palm of that hand. We can leave that. Thumbnail on the other hand, sure, why not? Fingertips. I think we're there. For the hands, that's enough. Little claws. Okay. Now I'm going to make a half step between this tan skin tone and the tanned highlight that I've got in the palette. And those who've seen me do this before will know what's coming next. I'm going to do the same highlight again, smaller. And as I say again, if you've got a very, very fine pointed brush, now is the time to be using it. We're going to do highlights on the eyelids, the nose, all that stuff. And to make the face look soft, we want to build up those highlights in small steps. Okay, so forehead. Bridge of the nose. Eyelids. I really like, and the cheek highlight still connects down to the upper lip. I really like these Greek mythology figures. I think that was a very cool thing to do for that Kickstarter. little bit in the center of the chin. Now I'm getting a dried bit in the tip of my brush right there. Just want to make sure you gently remove that with your thumbnail, very, very gently. Otherwise, the paint will not flow properly. There we go. Reload. And we want to use this color in the ears as well. So a little bit close to the body, inside the ear again. Along the edge of the ear, put some little dots. And the tip of the ear. Same thing on the other side. There we go. Oh, somebody joined us. There we go. I'm happy with that. So I'm going to go one step lighter just for the main highlights of the face. I'll grab a little bit of that tanned highlight color. I'm going to throw just a touch of creamy ivory in that, and an even smaller touch of yellow. Reaper Sun yellow, just to warm it up a little bit and lighten it just a little bit. Now I'm using a size 2 Winsor Newton, completely unsuitable brush for this job, but this particular brush is brand new. It's got a lovely point on it, and that's really the part that matters. You'll be working with the... Oh, that's a great photo. Great photo. Yeah, you can really clearly see the highlights coming up. Good stuff. So now I'm going to do the same. So all I did was I just lightened the tanned highlight with a little bit of creamy ivory, touch of yellow, and I'm going to redo the highlight in the center of the forehead, tip of the nose, top of the cheek, upper eyelid, just kind of the center of the upper eyelid, close to the center of the face. There we go. Starting to show up. I just started from the highlight paint straight from the bottle. So I might have skipped a step in there, but yeah, I didn't actually just do straight highlight. I went straight to, I took the highlight color, added yellow, and added creamy ivory. Okay, and then going to do that same color out on the tip of the ears, just a few little dots. Lighten it up. There we go. That makes me happy. Hi, Sean. Welcome. There we go. A little bit more on the cheek. I'm pretty happy with how this is looking. So why did I add yellow? The warmth of the yellow, I feel like it was kind of, it just needed a little bit of something extra to really bring that face out. And we're also going to use the yellow on the hair and on the fur to bring that out. I just realized she's got like a little Bacchus or goat's head or something right in the middle of her armor. That's cool. There's a ton of little details that are now visible on this armor now that the green liner is on there. Right on. Okay, so now that we've got that done, now we can build up the hair color. So we had done the auburn shadow color. That was our first shadow color in the hair. Now we're going to grab carrot top orange, and the same process we were doing earlier with the tiny little dashes and lines and marks with the fur. We're going to do that again, but now we're going to concentrate those hash marks on the centers of shapes on the light side. So our spotlight on the model is going to be like upper part of her legs, torso, and around her face and her horns. So for example, We're not going to put these marks on the bottom of her on the front, like on her shins. That's a shadow side. We don't need to do any more there. But like say on her knee, we'll do a whole bunch of these little marks with this lighter color on the knee, over top of the ones, and they don't have to line up with the previous ones. But we're not going to wrap all the way around the leg or around to the back. We're going to focus them in the center. So where we want there to be a highlight, like in the center of the knee, we do more of these marks. And then as a result, a lot of the brown liner that you could previously see will start to disappear under these smaller marks. Now, it's not going to completely disappear, but it'll be less obvious. And we just focus these little marks closer to the center of where our light should be. So we can put a few on the outside edge, okay, but we're going to concentrate them in the center of her thigh. There we go, like that. So Sean, just a heads up, you're probably trying to figure out right now how to turn the music off. And if you are, just post in the chat there and somebody will help you out. That's usually the problem people are facing right about now when they get into the chat the first time. All right, I'm going to keep doing the same thing on the opposite leg. So I know that I want my central highlight to be there. So I'm going to do lots of these little marks, but I'm going to increase the concentration of them towards the center of where I want the highlight to be. There we go. And I think we want to do some of this on the front of these little shins, like these little foot extensions. Put a bunch of those on there, but again, concentrated towards the center of those shapes. And then working our way down the leg. We get to the hoof, the hooves. And I'm going to do this color on the little bits of fur that are at the top of the hoofs. I'm going to make sure I get this color on the edge of that line that separates the center of the hoof. And then just do a few little dots and lines to the left and right. Make the hoof a little bit more visible. There we go. I'm pretty happy with that. Those shapes are starting to show up. And we've got one or two more highlights to go. So we're not too concerned that that might not be bright enough yet. And we'll do the same thing now on the back of the hand. Now the ones, we want to focus this a little bit more towards the thumb side of the left hand. And then as we go across the back of the hand, make sure you keep the fingers separate. Don't just paint this all over the back of the hand. We want each of the fingers to be highlighted with separate little dots. Okay? And then we'll do her bicep. Lots of little dots on there. Dash lines. That's a tiny little space to work. There we go. Do that on both arms. Oh my gosh, that's a small space to work in. There we go. A little bit on the elbow. Now the fun begins. Now we're going to do those braids and stuff in the hair. So starting with this braid that goes over the top of her head, we are going to do small little marks like I originally said on each of the separate shapes, but focus more towards the ones beside her face so that we keep the light focused in the center. With the bits that go over her head as well. Little dashed lines. Again, focused more towards the center. A little bit of orange on the back of each ear. Tiny fur scritch marks. Little fur dashes. Now, there's some braids in her hair under the horns. We want to give each of those little knots its own little highlight. Same thing on the other side. In here. Focused more towards the center as always. Okay. Starting to get there. I'm just going to give my brush a quick clean. And now, if you recall when we looked at this volume of hair, we wanted this to be the center of our highlight. So there's a little bit of this hair shows under her little earring there. So I missed that earlier, but I'm going to give it a highlight now. And do the same thing, just pull the light out from under her ear towards about there. So position right around there is where I want the center of the highlight to be. And then I'm going to reverse the model and do the same thing and pull the highlight from the shadow side up towards that spot in just repeated thin lines pulling upwards. Okay, starting to build up that highlight and do a little bit of long thin lines out to the tip of that little bit of hair there. Now, we got to get in under the back end of that spear. It needs to be highlighted in there as well. So we'll just put a little bit in there. Definitely an awkward spot to reach into. A little bit looking at it from the back, but not too much. Okay, and then the hair on the crest of her head, in there, is that visible? Yeah, in there. A few little lines on that. And then where the sort of ponytail, not ponytail, but like the flowing hair starts, we want to highlight right at the crest of that, close to the back of the horns. And there's a sort of an outward curve. Anywhere that there's like a convex outward curve, we're going to put a little bit of a highlight of this color. Because this is not our highest orange highlight. We still got 2 colors to go after this. So we can do fairly large highlights that encroach a little bit on the shadow side at the top of the head. Not too far, but just a little bit. And if you want to do the halo effect, this would be like the main color of the halo effect around that hair. The halo effect is just like the way that the light shines off of a smooth, round volume of hair on your head that can look a bit like a halo. All right, and I think the backs of the two legs could use just a little bit of this color, a few little dash marks at the top as they face directly upwards. Now I've been making this lovely Winsor & Newton brush work its butt off all weekend. It probably needs to be given a rest and some conditioner and all that kind of stuff, but that's probably why it's starting to splay out as I'm using it. It's been used a lot this weekend. Okay, have I missed anything? Don't think so. Okay, so next step on the hair. We're going to go up to orange highlight. Let's just roll the paint a little bit, smooth it out. Get our brush loaded up. And now if you have a really pointy, like your best pointy brush is what you want now to do some more hash marks to bring in the focus of the highlights. So top of the legs, gonna get this color kind of in the center, directly above the knee. As tiny as you can make those little lines. So if I put 10 lines, let's say I put 10 lines in this section, 5 of them will be pretty much on top of each other, right in the center, and then 2 or 3 on each side. So we end up with the light focused slightly more towards the center than the periphery, in line with her face. And I'll do the same thing on the other leg, but now that light's going to be even a little bit further towards the center. Little tiny lines, tiny lines over top of the ones we did before. But my focal point is going to be kind of in line with the corner of that kilty next to the second rivet down on that little. It's going to be, that's kind of where my highlight lines up. So again, if I had 10 marks that I was making, 5 of them will be right in this central point here to bring the eye, bring the light into that spot. And because these lines we're making now are so small, you're going to tend to catch the top of the sculpted texture more, and that's going to enhance the look of it being fur. But we're still doing little tiny hash marks. Now, on the hooves, I'm kind of happy with the way the legs look, but I'm going to put a few little marks in the fur just above the hoof, just a few, because this part of the leg is in shadow. But where it starts to come forward towards the toe, towards the hoof, we'll just put a few in the center on each side. And I'm going to put a row of dots of this color on that corner of the cleft in the toe, just to make sure that we don't lose the visual idea that that's a cloven hoof. There we go, like that. So we have our centrally focused light, and now we know kind of where our light's going to be focused around the face at the top. Oh, I forgot the hands. So more little marks by the thumb, tiny little ones, small as you can make them. Back of the hand. And we want to be more towards lines than dots if you can. Other hand, same idea. Back of the thumb. Bicep. Both arms. Now we're into the hair again. So my central highlight on this part of the hair, like the center of my main highlight, I want it about there. Okay, and then can do a little bit more out there on the outside of the curve, but not much, just a little touch. And just a little bit at the very tip, but I want a good strong highlight right there beside the face. I can do each of these little braid bits, gets its own little marks, little dashes and dots, more dash than dot though, right beside the face where possible. Just don't completely cover the brown liner. Keep going with our orange highlight. So now I need a line of highlights down the center of this braid. And we want that to be closer to the face. So we'll just refine that a little bit. And we can compose that of little dash marks right beside the face. Again, every time I say right beside, I mean right beside, except don't cover the brown liner. Okay, now we're doing the backs of the ears. Little dashes on the back of the ears, little fur dashes, tiny, tiny little dashes. Little fur texture, both ears. Smallest little dashes you can make. More towards the top of the ear than the bottom. And now we can continue working our way around. We got these little bits of braid in here. You get a little highlight on the top. Little braids get highlights towards the front. Just these little shapes. This little bit here. This little sticky outy bit. I don't know what you'd call that. Little frill or something. And then top of the head, remember we said we had a little bit of a reflection there, a little bit of a halo effect. So we can just enhance that as we work our way around. But again, our main highlight on this hair is right beside the face. That's where we want to make sure we've put a lot of focus. More than anywhere else. She might have grapes or something in her hair. I'm not sure. But as a fawn, it's highly likely. Okay, I'm quite happy with that. There's one spot. There. Okay. You just have to kind of keep rotating her around till you think you've found everywhere that you want to have those little highlights. Now, the horns. I think the horns need to be next. Just double check to see if there's any pending questions. Nope. So for the hair around the face, where I used the yellow, sorry, I just recalled, where I used the yellow in the skin tone, I want to do the same thing in the hair. So I'm going to put a bit of creamy ivory into that color we just used on the hair, this orange highlight color. Just a little bit of creamy ivory, and again, just a little touch of sun yellow. And we're going to use this color to do one more layer of highlight in the hair, but just in the immediate vicinity of the face. So these little knots of braid each get one more little highlight right around the face. These bits on that go over the crown or the temple. Each shape gets its own individual little lines. Quite close into the face to make sure that's where the focus stays. Few little dots along the edge of the ear, close to the face. And then that large mass of hair to the side of the face gets a highlight of this on each of the individual sculpted strands, right in the center of that area that I identified earlier as the middle of the highlight. So why did I do that? So that if you look at the photo right now, the face is framed in yellow and the highest values are right around the face. So overall the mini looks pretty good, but your focus gets brought right into the center of the face, and that's what we want. Okay, so we're going to do the same sort of idea on the horns now. We're going to start by painting the horns leather brown, which might seem like too light of a color at first. But what we're going to do is we're going to start with that color. And these horns have like a texture to them. But I'm really only going to highlight the part of the horn. So they've got these long lines underneath, which I think are part to support it for the printing process. So I really want to paint this color above those lines on each of those individual segments. Hey, looking good. Very good. Bell the cat, your stuff's getting better every week. Yeah. Very clear focal point. It was well done. Yeah. Yep. Keep it up. Now, so I'm doing a separate highlight or separate line of color on each of these separate segments and not covering the brown liner in between. This may seem like an impossible pain in the neck, but it's not too tough. Now when I go on the back, those same printing artifact lines seem to be there, and I'm not going to paint all the way down. We're just going to paint right at the top, and this will give the illusion of the horns being kind of raised up above the hair. And we'll do that on both sides with this color. Oh gosh, my eyes just getting tired now. Go. And on my figure, there's a prominent mold line goes all the way down along the sides of the horn, which is good fun. We're going to ignore that, pretend it's not there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to put some creamy ivory into that brown. Into the leather brown. Yeah. And we're going to highlight the center of each of these horns. Now, you could do this as a texture if you wanted to, but I'm just doing it as a simple kind of smoother highlight. And just in the center, so that we're re-emphasizing that focus on the face. Essentially, these will be like little focal lines pointing towards her face. Yeah, this brush is getting fed up with me. Okay, there we go. And now we're going to do one more layer of highlight on those with more, you guessed it, creamy ivory and just the tiniest little touch of yellow to tie it into the yellow in the hair and on the face. And this is just going to be focused in the center of those little horns. It's like a little line of dots. There's like a little ridge on each horn, and this is like a little row of dots that goes up each horn, and get the tip of the horn too. So they're like little two focal lines that bring us down to the face of the figure. I like it. I'm happy with that. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do, let's get on with this armor. Now this armor's looking pretty interesting to me. There's a lot of bits on this that could be painted as like non-metallic metal, but we're just going to treat it as leather. So essentially what I want to do is build up the color, but don't cover over any green liner that should be preserved as shadow. So the idea would be we can go back in and black line or dark line afterwards, or we can just simply never cover over things that should stay dark. And we'll try that today. Now, the green color is going to go and be lighter. It's going to be lighter towards the center of the model, right? So I'm going to start by making a mix of green liner with leaf green, and it's going to be like 75% leaf green, hopefully. There we go. Ah, nice fresh breeze now. Very nice. Okay, so this color is my shadow color of my armor. So what I'm going to look for is anywhere that there's kind of a raised surface. So like this plate in the front here is going to get this color. And now I could do this as a leather texture by putting all kinds of hash marks on it, but I think that could be confusing adjacent to the fur. So I'm just going to paint this as a smooth object, and afterwards we'll come back and we will paint some damage on it with the lighter brown color. Same thing with like this plate on her chest. There's these loops here that support the front of the armor. We'll paint around those and leave the shadows in place. Same thing with this little goat head on her chest. We won't paint over that. We'll leave that dark colored. So we're really just looking for the raised shapes, and we're looking at all this detail and painting any smooth areas. Really focusing on areas closer to the center at the front. I don't know if that's starting to become visible yet, but we've now got that goat head shape becoming visible. There's like two little pauldrony bits here. We'll highlight the center and sides of those. There's a belt. Give that a little highlight. Now these two leather belts that wrap from there around the front, I think we'll make those green. So the armor in between that gets green as well. Just remember again that this is a shadow color. The leaf green color is going to go on this, on top of this still, as the main color. I think this belt should be brown, and we'll make this diamond shaped thing here in the front brown, but then these little straps that are hanging down will make these green. So just paint everything except for the details this green color. It's quite an interesting, complicated model. I like it. Now for the kilt, paint each of these sections separately and preserve the dark line between the sections of leather. And work your way around to the back and do the same thing. Not super concerned about brushstroke direction at the moment. If I was doing this as a texture, my brushstrokes would be going all different directions to create the texture. And on the next layer, we'll be pulling the light closer to the center. And as I said, we're just being smooth. We're not too... In that next one, we'll focus the light center, and then our brushstrokes are going to matter a little bit more. For now, it's not a huge concern. Okay, and now we need to do these bracers. And these look to me like they've got some sort of wires wrapped around them, like bracelets, so we'll leave those. I don't think we're going to get to those today, so you can paint those whatever color you want later. I'm probably going to do them as like a copper non-metallic metal or something, but I don't think I'll get to that today because our focus is on the green armor and those bits. And then the difficult part here is going to be these pauldrons, where they have this curve shape, so we want the light to be closer to the front. So I'm just going to paint all the raised surfaces, but keep it so that I have like the highest highlight is in a line, kind of like along the front at the top of the shoulder. So we get the light looking right. Still trying to avoid painting in anything that should retain its shadow, like a dark line shadow. If anybody doesn't know what I mean by a dark line, it's like where your fingers meet, there's a space in between. So anywhere two surfaces meet, you get this very, very dark shadow. That's what I'm talking about. So all of these plates, where the plates meet, there's a dark shadow in between each of these plates. And in many ways, it's easier to leave them unpainted than to try to go back in and paint the dark lines afterwards. So I'm leaving those shadow areas uncovered. Okay, starting to be more visible. Did I miss any? No. Okay, and then this color on the back as well. Hey, right on. Oh, those horns look excellent. Thanks, Belle the Cat. Glad to have you here as usual. I appreciate you following along, and I appreciate you participating in the painting. Kind of gives me a sense of whether what I'm doing is even possible for people to follow along. So I appreciate that very much. And we'll see you next time. Next week is a lizard man. So I hope you are looking forward to painting the lizard man. Right on. Exactly. Don't like talking into the void. And I'm gonna once again encourage Heather, who is a friggin' amazing painter, to chime in chat too.
I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Okay, so that's our first
No.
layer of green. I see Sean is typing too. What's Sean got to say? Absolutely, yes. The question was, do we sell the figures we're going to paint at the shop? So here at my studio, yes. All the figures that we're working on, I have them available here on the wall of the studio. But you can also order them from Reaper, and we're trying to pick figures that are currently available in Reaper stock or that have recently been given away free by Reaper, so to give the most people possible easy access to the minis. So if you're a regular Reaper user, then you might already have them. If you're not, your local game store or Reaper Online. Next layer is just straight leaf green. I started mixing the next color, but I was thinking a step ahead. The next layer is just leaf green, and then the one after that we'll add some yellow and white in. So I'm going to start in the same place again, knowing that my layers are intended to be lighter towards the center. So now my brush strokes are going to come from the periphery in towards the center to make sure that the light is stronger there. And I just want this light highlight coming in towards the middle. The little belts. Now we'll do the chest armor. Still painting around our little goat head demon guy. More green towards the middle. Little pauldrony bits, edge of these belts. I'm going to give all of these a little bit of this green, but really focusing more of it towards the center to be in line with our spotlight on the figure's face. So this little bits of leather hanging down. We'll do the top of them. What do I mean by the top of them? I mean any surface on these little leathery bits that are going to catch the light directly from above, we're going to add some of this green to. If the light wouldn't hit it directly, we don't add any green. So that's why we haven't painted these at the back where they show between her legs, because that's down in the shadows. The light's not going to hit it directly. So they're painted the green liner, but they don't need to be highlighted like these pieces do. And we'll do the same thing on the kilt as well. And I'll just remind everybody that if you're watching on Twitch, if you come and join us on the Discord, you can ask questions, show me a photo of what you're doing and get feedback. If you're following this on YouTube, well, then you've probably already found the YouTube channel, and that's good. And I think there's now a catalog of 26 of these paint-alongs on the Miniature Monthly channel. Keep the green focused towards the center on raised areas, bringing the light forward and center. trying to remember why exactly we were going to do these particular colors. Oh, I know. It's because I was trying to figure out how to do green leather on another figure I've been working on. And Heather had some interest in this color scheme too, and I can't remember exactly what it was. Heather, was there a particular idea that you were pursuing? I can't remember now. My memory's
I don't
terrible.
remember.
I'm lucky I remember to paint the right mini on the right day. So just, again, retaining the dark lines, keeping the light focused in the center of these shapes, and more towards the center of the mini overall. It's kind of cool. I can sort of see the light building up there already. I'm liking this. I think the main thing we need to do is figure out how to convince Heather to teach some of these. Because Heather has very cool painting ideas.
I'm going to laugh a lot.
Sorry, Heather, I've got the sound muted. You have to. I can see you chatting, but I can't hear you because I've got the sound turned off on there. I'm just going to go ahead and assume what you said was, I'd love to paint and do some of these paint-alongs and be in charge of them. I love to do them. Maybe not so much then. Oh dear. There we go, a little bit of light building up. Okay. I think now on the back, I'm just going to do like a little bit of an edge highlight on some of these shapes just by putting some dots along them to make them better defined. Edge of each of these straps on the kilt. Okay, so just hitting the edges of all the shapes on the back to make them a bit easier to see. And yeah. All right, so the next step is going to be what I had already started doing, which we add a little bit of this white in, the creamy ivory, and a touch of the yellow. Now, where there's already a lot of yellow in the green, this yellow is not going to do much except warm it up a little bit. And we're mostly getting the value from adding the white. And now this is going to, we really want to keep this color focused in towards the center to build up, keeping our aim of the focal point on the face. So if you look at the top of that armor plate in her chest, there's like a little edge on it. And this is where I want to start focusing this color. And you're going to notice probably right away it's a much limier sort of green, a much yellower green. And it stands out a lot more. And so this color, you just want to be a little bit sparing with it. That's why we start right in the middle where we want the focal point. And as we work our way along, we will stop adding any more once we've got enough to illustrate the focal point that we want. So I'm just going to work in like little concentric rings. Okay, so like the chest armor, this belt, along the edge of this belt. The center of this belt, brush strokes going into the middle. keeping that light focused in the center. Now we need to do the edges of these armor pieces, so that the edge closest to her face first, a little bit of emphasis on the corner, and then the opposite one as well. Kind of look, yep, this is still working. Do the edge of the next armor plate facing towards her face, keeping that focal point. Does that still work? Yeah. And I can do a little bit more, just working my way out slowly, making sure that we don't go so heavy and so far out that we start to pull the eye away from the center. I think we're okay. Tops of these little two belts at the front. Alright, and I think we can go do a little bit on the arms. Just a little bit in the center of these, so the highlight on these little arm guards should be in line with the face, the shoulder, like that. I kind of like that. It feels like it's all right. Right there, but that's probably far enough. I'm going to do some down in the center. So this little bit on the kilt, bit of the kilt. Right. So remember we had that highlight on her leg. So we're connecting down through her chest, through that belt, through these little belts, through this little bit of armor, to that highlight in the center of her leg. So the all the lighting then becomes kind of tied together. And for me, that's how I kind of visualize supporting that spotlight. There we go. So her shape is well defined. The light is well defined, I think. I need to bring it up even more in that spot right in the center of her chest. I like it. I like it. Yeah, hey Sean, I see your post there about grabbing the next figure for this these paint-alongs. The next one up is a lizard man, which is kind of a fun one. And I don't know, I kind of like having this marker point in the week where I can just know that I'm going to sit down, spend 3 hours, focus on a mini, and it helps me kind of just keep a cycle going in the painting. We also, this weekend past, did a workshop on Friday night and a workshop on Saturday morning. And that was a lot of fun too. And I think going forward, we're going to try to do more of that. Mostly this Saturday morning. I think the Friday night thing, not many people are interested in coming to the studio and paint on Friday nights. So I think we'll just focus on the Saturday workshops. And Aaron is doing, Aaron Lovejoy is doing Friday night Twitch streams again. So maybe we'll leave the Twitch streams and stuff like that for Aaron on Friday nights, and we will paint ourselves do workshops on Saturdays. I think I would like that. All right, I'm going to do one more level up. I'm going to add more white and a bit more yellow again into that green. So this is going to be a lot lighter. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as like an edge highlight color, just very close to her face. So right in the edge there. That little bit of armor, that line right below her neck. Above the little demon head in there. Okay, now I do want to remember we're going to do some leather scratches and stuff in a minute here. But I'm going to paint the belts and things first when we do that. And I think that will overall enhance like the lightness in other areas. So I want to make sure this is really going to stand out. when I do that other effect. I like that. Okay. Now, let's do the brown leather belt. This is going to be russet brown. So it's our like brown leather color. And we're going to highlight it with polished leather, I think was the color I picked out. Don't really remember now. It's been a couple of hours. So I'm going to paint the belt this russet brown color. And again, making sure I don't cover over anything where I would normally go back in and put a dark line at the end. Yeah, and Sean, if you want to participate in these paint-alongs, we'd love to have you. You know, ask questions. Tell me it's not the heavy metal way of painting. Get me all sorted out. We can have a good argument about how the different paint styles work. That's it. For those of you who don't know, Sean is a very experienced professional painter who just lives down the road here, and we love having Sean come out to help us. He helps me do the judging on some of our painting contests, and he's a really good painter. We abuse his talents and his connections as often as possible. So this large pouch on her backside, I'm painting that this russet brown color as well. I'm really focused on the raised detail part of it though. Again, trying not to paint over anything that I want to keep the dark lining. Oh, Sean is posting a rebuttal. Here we go. Here the fight begins. Let's go, Sean. Alright, and I think since we got this color on the go, let's paint all the leather bits on the staff this color. So that includes right out to just short of the where the start of this narwhal horn is. We'll paint it all the way back. And then on the inside here under her arm, we'll paint all of this. All these little leather straps. Might be a bit much to ask to keep this all separated. We might have to dark line some of that. Keep working our way back. Color all that in. Do the same thing on the front. There's a lot of little details on this. Thanks, Sean. That's a good, I appreciate that. And I agree. That's why I take classes every chance I get. Sean's just saying it's always useful to watch other people paint, learn new techniques, add them to the repertoire. That's why I always take classes. I take at least a couple of classes a month to keep my brain going. And I teach classes as often as possible for the same reason. Partly so that I can hear the ideas of new painters who haven't already been kind of brainwashed into thinking about painting in a certain way, and then I can steal their creativity. But also so that by thinking through how do I do something and simplifying it, also helps me to simplify and understand my own painting process. So that's why I like painting with beginners as often as possible. Okay, so there's the brown leather on the staff. Next thing, check the Twitch stream to see if anybody's asking questions. First time chatter. Hey, Blake. Great to see you on there watching. Good to have you, man. Blake is a fabulous painter. Love seeing Blake's stuff. He did a glowing goblin shaman with a mushroom kind of thing the other day that I really liked. Oh, Blake was at our workshop on the other night too. All right, so now I need to let this dry a little bit before going in any further detail. So what can we do while we're waiting for that brown leather stuff to dry? Let's do the eyes. Ooh, the eyes on this one are going to be fun. Okay, so I'm going to switch to a tiny brush now. We're going to switch to this 00 brush. And I'm going to get it working. There we go. Now there's a couple of interesting things here that I need to hit. One is that her lips are not painted yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some more brown into that, or not brown, what's this? Skin tone into that red mix I made earlier. Add a bit more red to refresh it. And this is going to be my basic lip color. I'm going to put this a little darker even. Going to give her some very dark red color on her lips. Just on the lower lip, really. So just going to line up the brush parallel to her lips. Let it drop in there and do just a little bit of this rosy color across her lips. And now that I'm doing that, I see that she does not actually have... On we go. There we go. All right. I had just painted the lip, the lower lip, I think, and I was getting ready to do the eyes. So for the eye color, I'm going to do bright green eyes on her. I know that's cliche, but I'm doing it anyway. So how I'm going to do these eyes? I'm going to use the skin, basically the skin tone, the tan skin highlight. I'm going to throw in a touch of the creamy ivory, just until I feel like it's light enough to be, that's too light. So I want the sclera, right, the whites of the eyes to be lighter than the areas around, but I don't want them to be pure white. So I want a light color, but not pure white. So that's what I'm going to do. There we go. There's my lighter color. An off-white gray, or like a cold off-white is often better for this. But I'm just going to work with what I've got on my palette. And I think she is going to be looking at somebody who's kind of like off-screen that way. So she's going to be looking to her left. So I'm going to do the two-step eye, which means I'm only going to paint the left side from my perspective of the eye. So I'm going to leave the iris there already painted, and I'm just going to paint white for the corner of the eye. Or not. It turns out it's too dry here, and my paint is drying too fast. So what am I going to do about that challenge? Those of you who've watched these videos once or twice will know flow improver. A tiny bit of flow improver added in. So this is just Liquitex Flow Aid Straight. I put just a tiny bit of that into that mix, and that's going to slow the drying time just enough that I can get the brush up to the figure before the paint dries and make my little dots. And if I'm careful, it shouldn't flood. So now I'm going to get lined up again carefully. Line up the brush, line up the miniature, and then just a little dab in the corner of the eye. Nope, it's not working. I must have a little bit of a block on the end of that paintbrush. Clean it up. Try again. So what do you do when things are not working? Well, the first answer is throw the mini across the room and walk away. No, maybe not. There we go. Practice dots on the thumb. Okay, it's working now. So it must have been a little bit of a paint blob on the end of the brush. We get lined up there, and same thing again. Lower the brush into place. Now, why is this not cooperating at all? Is there something physically in the way? There we go. Finally got it. Okay, so now we've got our eye painted, looking off to our left, and we'll do the other eye the same way. Just the tiniest little bit in the corner of the eye. Now we've got them. There we go. And I think what I want to do is we're just going to put a little daub of dark green in the lower part of those irises. These are very, very tiny little eyes, but they're beautifully sculpted, so it's actually pretty easy to line up the brush for this. So let's do it. Little tiny daub of green in the bottom part of that iris. Do that on both sides. There we go. Now she's got a little bit of a faint green color. Now, if I was a master painter like, say, Derek Schubert or one of those folks, or Ann Forster, the next step would be to do a little swoop of a more yellowy, lighter green color. Still a desaturated green, but a much brighter green in the lower part of the eye, just to kind of highlight the lower part of the iris. So let's do that little swoop in the lower part of the eye of the light green. Let's see if we can challenge those master painters today. Oh my God, it worked. Look at that. Well, that's a bit of luck that went well. Now, if I was feeling super saucy, and I feel like I am feeling super saucy, we would put a reflection dot in each of those eyes. Now, if you're a beginner, probably the two last things I just did, you're just going, Jeff, you're nuts. Why are you making me do that? And if you're not comfortable with it, just don't do it. But I do recommend trying to paint the eyes at every opportunity, because after doing it a few times, it's not intimidating anymore. If you need to know what a good eye painting technique is, just do a quick search for painting eyes is secretly easy, and there's a whole YouTube like 2-hour tutorial on painting eyes there that's specifically for that. Little tiny reflection dot. Oh my gosh, that worked. This is why I love Christine's sculpts, right? Like, this mini is sculpted to be paintable. Really love it. That worked out okay. I can live with those eyes. Two-tone irises and reflection dots and everything is in there. That makes me super happy. I can live with that. Now, let's get on with our leather. So the next thing we need to do is highlight all the leather on the various belts and things. So I'm going to start with this belt around her waist. There's like a little L shape in there of leather, so I'm going to give it a little edge highlight on those shapes with a few little dots. And then I'm going to highlight the bottom of it just a little bit where the shape of the belt curves outward and would catch the light. Same thing on this next section, but I'm just going to do a few little scratches and marks because this part of the belt is a little bit more outside of the light. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. Top of this little buckle bit, top of those, back there in the corner. Yeah, and then now we're looking at the outline of this larger piece. Now you could argue that this should be a piece of metal, but I'm going to paint it as a piece of leather because it's my mini and I can. And we'll give it just a little bit of an additional sort of few little marks along the bottom. A few more scratches in the center towards the top. I don't want this to distract from the fur texture, right? Okay, so that's good enough. And then I think for the straps on the staff, I want a half step between that dark brown and this polished leather color. So I'm just going to mix those two together, and this will be the color that I use for those various straps. And what I'm going to do is paint each of those straps sort of separately. So like there's little coils, like leather lines wrapped around. So I'm going to highlight each of those shapes separately, with the center of the highlight being basically the center of the staff, but in line with the highlight we did on our leg. So my leg highlight center is there. The highlight on the staff should basically be in the center as well overall. And then we can focus little scratches and things in the different sections of leather in a different way to keep them separate from each other, but their overall highlight should be, I think, parallel to the one in the center of her body and on her leg. Something like that. Alright. And there's more of these straps up behind her head. So we'll highlight all of those as well. There we go. And then we'll turn it around and do the same thing. But this time we want to keep this highlight basically pointing towards the top and a little bit towards the front. So this is on the shadow side of the model. We still have to highlight on the shadow side. We just don't highlight as brightly. We're going to pretend that this bit of wood is actually leather. Because it's on the back, nobody's going to notice. Of course, all of you will notice. So yes, there are two main highlights. One in the center at the back, and one lined up with the front of the leg. The one on the front of the leg, or the front of the staff, is going to get an additional highlight. The one in the back is not. We're also going to highlight this little pouch. And this little pouch has like an owl shape or something on it. Or it might be like a cornucopia sort of thing with little nuts and leaves and things embossed on it. I'm not sure. Mine is not very clear. It could also just be that I'm blind as a bat and I can't tell. But there's definitely like an ornate sculpture in the leather on that. So highlight that however you see fit. Create shapes or just work on the shapes that are there, whatever you like. But for me, that's enough. Okay. Now back to the front. Back to the front. I'm going to do that polished leather color. I'm now going to highlight the straps that we just did that little bit of highlighting on, but only doing this on the front of them. Now I'm going to inflict some leather damage on these using that leather brown color. So I'm not doing much in the way of like scratch marks and damage and that kind of thing at this stage on these, because I'm going to do quite a bit of that, or maybe just a little, I'm not sure, with the leather brown in a moment. Just keeping that highlight focused towards the adjacent highlight. Okay, good enough. Oh, at the back up here. Just a little bit behind the head. Not much. There we go. That's enough. Now, let's do... okay, let's just grab the leather brown. There's leather brown. Let's start doing a few little bits of scratches and damage. You want to use a very fine brush for this. And I'm going to focus it really along the top edge and on the corners of this buckle. Put some few little scratches on there. Now one of the common tricks is to use a bit of ink to add some interesting color to the leather, and we can do that too. We've done that on these streams before. There, I think that's enough for that. Maybe put a little bit of damage right there. There, I like it. And I think this bit of leather on her leg, I'm going to put some damage on that too. So I'm putting a scratch out across that piece of leather there. Thanks, Sean. We'll see you again soon, man. Maybe a little bit like that. So a few little scritches and damage on the edge of the leather in a few spots. This is on the green armor leather. We'll do another one up here. A little bit of damage there, like she got hit with an axe or something. There we go. There we go. Yep, that does it for me. And then on these bits out here, we'll do a few little scratches and things. Not excessive, just a few. There we go. I'm kind of happy with that. Yep, I'm happy with that. So what's left? I think I will do a little bit of an ink thing, but I do want to put a little bit more of a scratch damage with that armor, so I'm going to just put a little scratch with this dark color. Alongside that other bit of damage I did, just so the scratch is a little bit more obvious. Okay, so now what do we need to do? This, I think I said earlier, she's got this narwhal horn staff here. So how are we going to make that look like ivory or something like that? I think what we'll do, let's paint it. Let's start by painting it brown liner. So whatever your dark brown is that you're using is like your black earlier. Let's paint the whole narwhal horn that color. That's going to be our shadow color on the horn to make it look like shiny, 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 shiny. Okay, so we'll do that. Narwhal horn is now painted black. And maybe for your mini it's not a narwhal horn. Maybe it's a, I don't know, a dragon horn, or it could be whatever you want it to be, right? I think I want to paint those wires this color too. These wires here on her sleeve. And on the other sleeve. The ones I said I wasn't going to paint, but that you guys could do as NMM or whatever on your own time. I've decided that mine are definitely going to be copper. Okay, and I do need a few little lines. So I'm going to use this brown liner to put back in some lines that I accidentally covered over. So we'll just do that as well. Oh no, Geoff made a mistake. Really? Again? Still? Just a few little... There we go. And now we're ready for whatever comes next. Still gonna wait for this to dry for a few moments. So let's get a little bit of ink. Let's do some ink. I'm gonna use, let's use transparent burnt sienna. Why not? It's gonna be reddish. And you could just use a deep red. Oh, I've already got deep red paint on the palette. I could use that. I was gonna say you can use deep red paint for this, but the ink has its own little shiny kind of finish, and that can look quite interesting in a leather. So I'm going to thin that down a fair bit. Just put on a little bit at a time. Now, the more you thin it, the oranger it looks, but that's okay. We can just repeat the brush stroke. And what I'm going to do is, see in these belts, I want to put some darker, more saturated sort of color towards the top. So I'm going to push this color up the belt. So from the center of the belt, I'm going to push it upwards so that this color sits kind of where a shadow would be on these curved leather belts. There we go. And I do a little bit of that in here too, around these little bolts. On this interesting shape on the front. There, I like that. And then we'll do some on the edge of this leather on the staff. And then on the bottom of the leather on the staff in there. But not so much out on the front, because I want to keep that sort of highlighted. And we'll do that along the back as well. World is starting to look a bit dark. The sun is setting, and the time change this morning. It's a bit dark earlier. There we go. I put a little bit around the edge of that belt pouch too. Why not? Throw some color in there. Out some shapes. Use a thumb to rub it off. That works. There we go. There she is. Now, that looks dry enough that I can start painting my unicorn horn. So the first color of the unicorn horn is going to be that leather brown color. So I'm going to grab my leather brown, and what I want to do is we're going to create a linear highlight which is just off from this one. So if the light from here is reflecting off, the highlight on the unicorn horn is going to be just a little bit, no, let's just do it parallel. Let's just keep it parallel. So if my line is like that, then I'm going to just draw a line down the middle. Okay, there's the line for the center of my highlight. And I'm going to basically edge highlight from the shadow upwards to that line. Sideways brush stroke, pulling the color upwards. This can be a little bit messy, but not super messy. I want to preserve that shadow so the spiral is visible. And then I'm going to do the same brush stroke going the other way. And where those overlap, I'm going to get a nice strong highlight. And in that position, it's okay if the highlight goes down into the shadow a little bit. In fact, I'll do that deliberately so you know what I mean. So now I'm going to eliminate the shadow in that line. There. And I'll finish doing that highlight like this. Okay, so there's my highlight. And we need to do a similar highlight on the back, but it doesn't have to be quite as light. So that mix I used to highlight the leather earlier, I'm going to use that to do the first highlight. Added a bit of the leather brown to it just to lighten it a touch. This will be the color I use for that same highlight, but along the back of the staff. So just like that down the back of the staff. Shoop, 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 shoop. And it doesn't need to connect to the other one. It can be a little bit separated, that's fine. Now, I'm going to grab creamy ivory, big blob of it, and throw that into my leather brown pile over here. So I'm getting quite a light color. And this is my second highlight for the front. Don't do this in the back, just on the front. And this lines up the same line as the one I just did. Okay. And we do the same idea. Very small line. Pulling or small highlights pulling towards that center line. Now my particular model here had a pretty bad set of mold lines, and they're interfering a little bit, particularly on this sort of horn shape. But if you're having a similar problem, just spend more time than I did clean up your model, I guess, is the only solution. But yeah, there we go. And now we're going to do the same thing, but just with creamy ivory. No other colors mixed in. Okay. And we're going to make that same highlight line. Just with the creamy ivory, same thing coming from both sides, but these highlights need to be smaller, tighter than the last ones. Okay, and now our staff is starting to look kind of shiny. And we're going to go one more step. We're going to do pure white on that as well. Now, normally I would reserve pure white, but I'm going to do the pure white mostly on the upper part of that same highlight. So not all the way down, just closer to the top. So it's kind of aiming towards the face and the center of the model gets that highlight just at the top. Okay, and that should help keep the focus towards the top of the model. Hope that makes sense. And don't forget, we've got this little goat head symbol in here. That could be done as a metallic paint or as an NMM. Let's do something a little bit silly. Let's do reddish copper on those wires on the arm. So I'm going to take the deep red. Right now they're painted that brown color, the brown liner. So I'm going to do an NMM similar to the shininess I put on that horn, but on these wires on the arm. So my highlight goes down the center of the arm. So I'm going to use this deep red to do a first coat of color, lining up that highlight in the center. There we go. So we get a line of color right there. Do the same thing on the other sleeve, or this other wire, just to be quite close to the little staff there. And we need to do this on the back of them as well. Just faintly on the back, smaller on the back than the front, because we're not making the backs of these wires as shiny. Just a little bit. There we go. Now, the next color I'm going to use this polished leather color, which sounds weird, I know, but whatever. We're going to do it. And I'm going to make the highlight in the center of those wires, the same as I did on these, on the unicorn horn, but line it, just each wire individually highlighted, with all the highlights lined up so their center lines up with that highlight on the arm. And we'll do that on the other arm as well. It's just a small little highlight. There we go. Now, we're going to jump over to our pure white, and we're going to make a mix of pure white and just a touch of that polished leather color. This is going to end up giving us a rich sort of creamy, almost like a skin tone. And this is our second last highlight. So we're going to do this quite tight in the center of the wires, giving us that little NMM highlight look. Same thing on the wires of the other arm. If it doesn't start to look a little bit shiny, do that same color again in the center of the one you already did. There we go. And now, pure white. Make sure you don't have any water or anything in it, but just pure, because you don't want it to flow down in between those little lines. And you're going to do essentially an edge highlight right in the center of that previous color we just did. It's going to darken as it's dried. It's not going to be super pure white, but it will make that look like some shiny wires on the bracelet. We do that on both sides. There we go, a little bit of NMM wire on the go. And I feel like we're kind of there with this model now. So what did we not do? We didn't do any NMM or anything like that on the little goat's head or on this little piece here on the belt, this little, I don't know what you would call that, little door knocker sort of shape or whatever it is. There's also these rivets and shapes on the leather straps. Those could use a bit of NMM. I think we've got I don't know if it's a rabbit's foot or something like that, which is the earring. You can paint that whatever kind of colors interest you. There's a little bit of an elastic or a leather tongue or something on her hair. Hold the hair in place. I feel like that's pretty much a finished model. The only thing we didn't do that I think we'll just quickly hit is going to be the stones on the base. And our light is sort of in the center here at the front. Okay, this is where our light is. So I think what we'll do, let's do something a bit crazy. I'm going to put a big old blob of stone gray in the middle of my palette. There we go. Stone gray is going to be my highlight color here in the center of the base, in here somewhere. Okay, so this is my lightest color here in the center of the base. I'm going to have to back this up a bit. Okay, use a bigger brush for this. Stone gray. So I'm just going to put a bunch of daubs of stone gray in the center here. Nothing too careful. It's irregular. And just a little bit of gentle pressure, so I'm not filling in the spaces in between the stones. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take that same stone gray and I'm going to mix a blob of stone gray and a blob of brown liner. I'm going to make my own shadow color for that stone. And I'm going to start that color at the back of the base. I'm just going to daub it in there. And just kind of let it go. But I'm not getting it on the feet. I'm not going to put it like really. And there's a side part here that looks like it's sand more than it's stone. Okay, this area here appears to be sand. This zone. But out here, this is clearly some sort of stone. So I'm just going to alternate between putting in blobs of this light stone color. Kind of a zone in the front and center. I'm just putting blobs of paint. Blob, 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 blob. Almost like stippling, but not really. I'm not being precise. I'm just dapping them in, dapping them in, dapping them in. But really focusing in that zone towards the front. And then I'll grab some more of that mix I just made, and well, this other paint is still wet. We'll just keep dabbing it in there. Just keep dabbing it in. We can vary the mix a little bit. So what am I doing now? What we're doing. This is a kind of wet blending. It's like wet in wet, wet blending. I'm dabbing in light gray into the dark gray stone color. I can make another halfway step. Maybe put a touch of orange in this one. Create some more color variety. And in the intermediate zone in between those two, we can put some more of this color in. Let's get the edges of these shapes back here. Edges of these stones. So we're just going to pick out our shapes by dabbing in this wet color. That's wet paint. And anywhere that the paint is still wet from before, we'll just kind of wiggle the brush to mix the two right on the base. Now, why am I doing this like this today? Because essentially what we're doing right now is a bit of wet blending. And I just want you to kind of notice that it doesn't have to be super precise. It doesn't have to be spectacular color choices. But it's always worthwhile to start trying this sort of thing early in your painting to get a feel for how it works. And I did a couple of classes on this with people recently, showing them how to do the basics. And I'd forgotten how fun this sort of just smooshing in the color, smoosh blending actually is what Aaron Lovejoy calls it. Smoosh blending, wet and wet, just dabbing the paint in there. Actually, Aaron's got an excellent online class series on just blending in general that's worth checking out. That's where I learned how to do a lot of this stuff. So now my base has some interesting colors in it. It's got some features picked out. It's a properly painted base. I can even, let's do something crazy. Let's put some yellow with a little bit of green, with more of that gray. So we're making a greenish color now, which is a little bit lighter than the one I started with. And let's do a little bit of green along the edges of some of these stones. Almost like they've got some fungus or moss or something growing on them. Just touch very, very lightly to pick out the shapes that you want to put on there. And if you want, you can always go back and put washes over them to dull them down. You can pretty much, bases are a great place to just mess around and practice making little blends and little shapes, little colors. And by using stuff which is already on my palette, it's a pretty good chance I'm not going to totally destroy the color theory idea or whatever I had for painting the model in the first place. It's just going to make it a little bit more interesting. Okay, without, and actually having that green and orange in the base makes the green and orange in the model look a little better as well. Let's put some real orange in there. There we go. There's a bit of blobs of real orange paint in there. And then I'm going to go back to my gray stone color again. Squash it all out again. Kind of resuppress it all. Just random brush strokes going all different directions. Very lightly touched. And as it dries, all of this is going to darken up. A lot of these colors are going to become less visible. But there'll be a hint of those colors and those tones in there. whole model a little bit more interesting as a result. Now, what do I do with this sand area? This dirt area over here? Well, here's the thing. Sand, dirt, like dry dirt, which has been broken up, looks lighter than you would think. So, like, if you were to measure the color of a sand block, it could be quartz, it could be something very light color, but also might be brown. But if you break that into 1,000 tiny little pieces, all those jagged edges and shapes reflect a lot of light, so it looks lighter than the color it actually is. So if you want to make, let's say, this dirt pile, we could take this brown, what brown was this? Polished leather brown. And I could just stipple in thousands of tiny little dots of this. And even though the value of this paint is quite light, it's a lighter paint, I can stipple it in there to give the impression of like dirt or sand or whatever it might be there. Some sort of material that's blocking out the spaces between the stones. There's thousands of random dots after dot after dot after dot, all different directions. That type of material looks lighter, so we can make that a little bit lighter. And at the end of the day, if we decide it's too light, we can just wash over it with a dark color, suppress it again, make it go away. But that texture will probably still show through even after you do a wash over it. And we can put a little bit of color variety in there with some lighter dots. There we go. So we've got our little bit of an interesting base now. We've got our girl pretty much fully painted, just a few little details that can pick out a bit later on. It's our compressor. Yep, and we're pretty much done with her for today. Alright, so look, if you decide to like fully paint and finish painting the model, please like post it on Reaper, post it on the Miniature Monthly website or on their Patreon, not Patreon, what's it called? Discord channel, and tag me. I'd love to see the results if you decide to paint along. And yeah, I enjoyed that. I'm going to finish this model, do some more refinement of her, and we'll see how we get along. Alright, I think that's it for today. Thanks to everybody who participated. Nice to see everyone. And look forward to seeing you for painting the lizard man, the lizard folk, next time.